Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazar of Chess channel and welcome back to the World Chess Championship in 2021. So we're following now of course the epic battle between the world champion Magnus Carlsen and the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi. We're now in the round 8. Really wild things happen in the round 8. We know that Magnus Carlsen won this epic battle in the round 6, the longest World Chess Championship match we have seen in the round 6, in which Magnus Carlsen won one game. But we have to really state, in that game Nepo had his chances. Nepo had really, I think, a better position for a long time against Magnus, but unfortunately for him, he played a couple of inaccuracies and then Magnus Carlsen eventually won the game. So let's check out now what happened in the round 8, because this was again really a great moment in this super event. So here Magnus opened with the move e4. Nepo response was e5. We have knight to f3, and after move knight to f6 we have again the Russian game on the board, the Petrov defense, and now Nepo is again searching for a symmetrical position, but you can do that of course when you're not down a point like this. I think Nepo should have played maybe a more dynamic opening, maybe a sharper opening. Again, of course, Nepo knows his theory in the Russian game, he knows his theory in the Petrov defense, but most of the times this Petrov opening leads simply into drawish line. So that's not something that I think Nepo is searching for now, because we have seen that when Nepo is playing with the white pieces, then most of the times Magnus finds really great opportunities to go into drawish line. So I think that Nepo should search maybe for different openings against Magnus Carlsen's e4. Against Magnus Carlsen's d4, against his Catalan opening, I think Nepo found great opportunities. But now the Russian game, as I said, in my opinion, is simply too drawish opening. So here after move knight to f6 we have d4, a little bit different move order, but now basically the game leads into the normal Petrov stuff, because after move d5 we have again this idea, knight takes e5, and both players have taken now the pawn in the center. We have now both players that have occupied of course the other side of the board. And the most important thing to recognize about the Russian game and about the Petrov defense of course is that we have again a pawn symmetry, which means now that we have here again 4 pawns on the queen side and of course 3 pawns on the king side. So that's why this symmetrical pawn structure is not allowing here immediately for one opponent maybe to create some wild attacks immediately. So that's why when we watch now, as I said, the pawn structure, you cannot create attacks immediately. What you can do is basically what both players have already done, which means you should basically occupy somehow this squares e5 and e4, or maybe here c5 c4. So that's why you don't want to tolerate your opponent's pieces like this on your side of the board. So that's why here Nepo is challenging of course this outposted knight on e5. Here Magnus takes, knight takes d7, bishop to d7, and Magnus does the same. He plays also here knight to d2, challenging also this outposted knight on e4. We have knight takes d2, bishop to d2, and after bishop to d6 you see the game is more and more simplified, and I think it fits simply for Magnus to go into the simplified lines, to go into drawish lines, because the only thing I think that you can do here is positional trade of pieces. What I mean about that, we should now watch this pawn structure in the center of the board. Here white has a centralized pawn in the center on a dark square, black has a centralized pawn on a light square. What black would love to do, I think, is gain some kind of a position like this, where you have a dark square bishop and you have a light square pawn, because now in the near future maybe this pawn can be attacked by the dark square bishop, and white would be always forced to defend the pawn with his own bishop or with the pawn on c3. So that's why you want to have basically your bishop on this opposite colored squares than the centralized pawn. So as I said, black would love to have a dark square bishop. On the other hand, white would love of course to trade off the dark square bishop and maybe continue the game with the light square bishop, where maybe the light square bishop of white would be slightly better piece than black's light square bishop. So we should always consider this positional trades of bishops when it comes to this these types of structures in the center of the board. So here in the continuation we have castling and now h5. And okay, I can understand now Nepo's choice to play a wild opening line, to play maybe a more dynamic opening line, but that's exactly what you should not do. Here advancing the pawn is really not the best option. You should maybe castle, hope for the best, hope for a draw, probably go into drawish lines, because if you want to play a wild opening line, then you should not play the Petrov defense, because I don't think that you can get so many tactical possibilities when you're playing the Petrov, the Russian game. So maybe Nepo should try out some other openings if he wants to surprise Magnus Carlsen. Now after move h5, Magnus is saying, okay, I got attacked here. What I need only in this game is a draw because I won one game. So Magnus plays now simply queen to e1. He wants to simplify the game because maybe this h5 he doesn't have somewhere in his opening preparation. He's saying, okay, I don't know, maybe the best theory here I want to simplify the game and trade off more pieces. So I can understand now Magnus Carlsen's play because he simply a point up. So here in continuation we have king to f8. Probably this was part of Nepo's preparation. We have now queen to b4, bishop to b4. As I said, white wants to trade off the dark square bishops because then we continue the game here from white's perspective with a slightly better bishop than black has done. So that's why queen to e7, we have bishop takes d6, queen to d6, and after queen to d2, I'm not seeing here good ways how Nepo can attack the position, although maybe rook to h6 can happen, rook to f6, but maybe white doesn't have so many defenders in front of the king, but still you don't have any support. You can play maybe this rook lift, but nothing special I think can happen in the continuation of the game. So here rook to e8, rook to e1, we have rook to h6. Now this rook lift looks really attractive, but it's basically a rook lift without support. When we play rook lifts, then of course we want to have more pieces in the attack. Now the rook can, I don't know, maybe come to f6. You would love, of course, to bring the rook on g6, where you can maybe create some ideas like bishop to h3, but nothing else, nothing special. So as I said, all of these rook lifts, as I said, looks a little bit attractive, but without, I think, support of some other pieces. So here in the continuation, Magnus plays now queen to g5. We have now c6, fixing the pawn structure in the center of the board. We have now rook takes e8, we have bishop to e8, and now rook to e1. The problem is now you cannot actually play this move queen to b4. Queen to b4 is not possible with this double attack because you get this one, you get c3, and if you take, then you get checkmated. That's the main issue. King to g8 and then queen to e. So you cannot really go and chase this pawn on b2 and also the pawn on d4. So it's not possible. So as I said, I'm not seeing here any way for Nepo how he should attack the position, because the game is so simplified that Magnus can really here lean back and hope for a draw, because I don't think that black can find good attacking opportunities. So we have rook to e8, we have bishop to e8, as I said, now rook to e1. As we have seen, queen to b4 is not the best option here. So queen to e3, queen to f6 here played by Nepo. We have queen to e3 by Magnus Carlsen. We have bishop to d7. Again, if you try some ideas of queen to e6, maybe to compete on the e file, then this could happen. Queen to d2, and again you have to compete here on dark squares. But now queen to a5 is also very tricky here for Nepo. You should then bring your, maybe here even queen to bx, so it's not a good position I think anymore for Nepo, because after this one we can then again play queen to b4 and try maybe to sneak in here with the queen on dark squares. So the dark squares are so vulnerable now to the attack that's why what I meant, you should trade off the dark square bishop from white's perspective. You see now every particular pawn here in the center of the board is on the light square. So even if this game reaches an end game and maybe the bishops are only on the board, then white is much better because black has too many pawns on light square. So that's really the better here continuation for white. So after move queen to e3, in the continuation we have bishop to d7. We have now h3, h4 here by Nepo, and now Magnus Carlsen plays maybe a risky move. He plays now the move c4. He wants to include his bishop into the game, but actually this is really not necessary, because after d takes c4 and bishop to c4, Magnus Carlsen has now an isolated pawn. And of course, this isolated pawn we can improve in the near future, but maybe it wasn't really the best of moves. You can play something else. You can play, I don't know, instead of c4, you can play c3, just fixing the pawn structure, and as I said, go into a slightly better endgame. But here after move c4, Nepo takes bishop to c4, and now comes the critical moment of the game. This is now the most important moment of the game. Look at what Nepo did here. He played now huge blunder. He played now the move b5. b5 is now such a suicide, because you're opening again the dark squares, and you see now this queen to a3 comes with an attack against the pawn on a7. So here Magnus plays that move immediately. Here queen to a7, we have now king to g8 by Nepo. Even if you try something like, I don't know, queen to d8, then we can still take, here from white's perspective, because after b takes c4, that's not possible because you get simply queen to a8 and you can maybe cover, but now with queen to e8 it's game over. Okay, you can maybe bring the queen in between, but it's not changing anything. So that's why this queen to d6 idea, in order to cover yourself, is not working. You don't have time to take the bishop on c4. That's the risk of playing king to f8. The king is simply vulnerable to this attack on the 8th rank. Very wild stuff. So I'm not sure what happened to Nepo. Queen to a3 here in the continuation, king to g8, and Magnus picks up the pawn. Again, you cannot take, of course, because here of queen to d7, and it would be a much better continuation here for Magnus Carlsen. This is a weak pawn, this is a weak pawn. This pass pawn is something that bothers, I think, black through the whole game, so it's game over. You have also some opportunities to get attacked also through the 8th rank, so here maybe rook to e8, then queen to c8, and again delivering some checkmates are also great opportunities for Magnus. So I'm not sure what happened to Nepo. He missed this simple tactic. Now it's almost like a winning game for Magnus, because we know how he plays brilliantly this endgame. Queen to a3, we have king to g8, and now Magnus simply takes a pawn. We have queen to d8, now Magnus simply retreats. And we have to also notice one particular thing, that here Nepo is also vulnerable around the square f7 now, because if you play something like, I don't know, rook to g6 in order to attack here the position, then with rook to e5 you can actually create simple counterattacks, because bishop to h3 is not working. You would love, of course, to play that, but now here queen to f7. As I said, you cannot play any attacks because you're simply too vulnerable here around the square f7. So after move bishop to b3, Nepo plays simply rook to d6, and now Magnus plays simply the best even suggested moves by the engine. He plays now first rook to e4, counterattack. Also he notices that the h4 is a weakness. We have now bishop to e6. Nepo is saying, I want to now simplify the game. Okay, I lost one pawn, nothing romantic, maybe I can draw somehow this game. But now after bishop to e6 we have rook to e6, rook takes after bishop to e6, sorry, I moved a little bit. Here after move bishop to e6, we have rook to e6. Magnus Carlsen traded off further pieces. F takes e6, but now again a good move here by Magnus Carlsen. Queen to c5. He's simply attacking now further these weaknesses. We can notice this. All of these pawns are weakness. Also the h4 is a weakness. So the problem is now, if Nepo goes into trades of queens after queen to d5, and I don't know, c takes d5 or e takes d5, still this is a winning game here for Magnus Carlsen, whatever you do, because first of all we have here a 3 versus 2 pawn endgame, and this should be simple win for the world champions. After move queen to c5, here Nepo tried queen to a5, tried to do some perpetuals probably by delivering some checks, but Magnus calculated this very easily. He played queen to c6, queen to e1, we have check, queen takes f2, but now queen to e6 comes also with the check, king to h7, we have queen to e4, and now b3. Here Magnus Carlsen is inviting Nepo to take this pawn, but now of course this is a weakness. So here after move queen to a2, queen to e8 was played by Magnus. We have king to h7, and here Magnus took also the pawn on b5. Now Nepo plays, of course, queen to f2. What Nepo is hoping for is, of course, a perpetual by playing queen to f4, and then maybe queen to e1 and similar stuff. He wants, of course, queen to f1, pardon me, and then queen to f4. He wants to go into perpetual checks and hope for a draw. But of course, this, if Magnus Carlsen now plays this endgame perfectly, then it should be probably a winning game for the world champion. So okay, after queen f2, Magnus of course played queen d5, at least preventing some queen to f4 ideas. Maybe queen to h5 is also possible, but okay, queen to e5 is still winning for white. In the continuation we have queen to b2, but now Magnus found a great way how to keep both of his pawns on the board, because maybe if you lose one pawn, still it would be probably better continuation for white, but you don't want to lose any pawns. You can double the pressure, you could push the b pawn, then you could push the d pawn, then the queen gets to stretch. Of course the queen cannot defend the potential promotion of both pawns. Here we have king to g8, we have queen to d3. Now Magnus Carlsen is applying the so-called Taras rule. The Taras rule says that you should bring your queen or the rook behind your pawn. Now Magnus just wants to push the pawn. Of course he is supporting also the b3 pawn. So in the continuation we have queen to f2, we have queen to c3 by Magnus, queen to f4, king to g1, and now after king to h7 we have queen to d3, again a check, g6, and now Magnus played again queen to d1, where he now now he can protect basically everything, because he's protecting first of all now the first rank, he's protecting also the pawn, but also he's supporting now the d pawn. So everything is glued together, everything is fixed. So now Magnus needs to just to push the pawn. So we have queen to e3 check, king to h1, we have now g5, Magnus is pushing the pawn here on d5, we have g4. Here Nepo is trying to spice up the game a little bit, but Magnus simply takes, h takes g4, and after h3, here Magnus Carlsen found the best way to defend the position. He played queen to f3, and in this position Nepo resigned. You can of course play a couple of checks, but you can really do perpetual, so Nepo realized it's a +6 here. Evolution, it's winning here for white for sure. So I don't know what happened. Nepo lost the game. I'm not sure what happened, how he missed this tactic. You see Magnus grabbed one pawn, but I think the shock behind this pawn move was too much to handle here for Nepo, especially because he lost also the game 6. So unfortunately for Nepo, he lost again with a huge blunder. As I said, I'm not sure why he is playing with so much respect for Magnus Carlsen. He should really play finally his chess. He should play his attacking chess, because we haven't really seen the best of Nepo in this event. He knows how to attack. He knows how to beat Magnus Carlsen. That's also something worth to say here, because he has beaten Magnus Carlsen many times. I'm not sure what's going on. It's almost over, I think, here, because Magnus Carlsen has now huge advantage. I'm not sure if Nepo can catch up this huge advantage, because we have seen how Magnus Carlsen is playing easily the game with the black pieces. He easily equalizes the game in an early stage of the game. So I'm not seeing really now any way how Nepo can get back into the game. He should try at least to play one or two sharp games. I'm sure that he'll come at least with some attacking ideas. He'll come at least with some opportunities. If he plays so symmetrical position like this, I don't think that he can gain any win. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. You see, I really am a little bit sad that the World Chess Championship could be maybe decided by huge blunders by Nepo here. I really didn't want that to happen. That's why I really didn't enjoy maybe so much the games that I expected. So as I said, I'm feeling a little bit sad, I have to really say, because Nepo was so far a real challenger. I really thought that he could make something happen, but unfortunately for him, he didn't make it. So okay, we'll see what will happen now in the continuation of the super event. If you want to follow some games that we have analyzed before, check out my coverage so far. We have analyzed many games, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.